The following podcast may contain discussions supported by science that may be considered dangerous to some listeners and conspiracy theorists. Discretion is advised.
The Three Down Greencast is brought to you by Lucky Bastard Distillers, Saskatchewan's premier distillery, and by the Pile of Bones Brewing Company, brewed in the heart of Regina. Welcome to the Three Down Greencast. You are listening to the internet's only Pesapalo podcast. I'm Joel Gasson with John Fraser as usual. Don't worry, we will explain what the heck I'm talking about in a second. Another big win for the Riders as they were yelling, "Start the car," after the game.
I like
no
that
question
reference.
over that one. After another come from behind victory, and one in probably even weirder, more dramatic fashion over the Hamilton Tiger Cats. So we will, of course, talk about that game, some of the moments, and look ahead to this week's rematch. And we're also going to talk a little bit the power rankings and where we think the team sort of sit at this point through a couple of weeks. However, before we get to all that, John and I have recently made a discovery.
Yes. One of the greatest discoveries. I would say out of our entire friendship, one of the greatest discoveries that we've ever shared with each other.
It's possible. Because it's that and probably the Youth Olympics broadcaster.
Where somebody has to win, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. That was a good one. And that we came across like completely organically.
Yes.
And this week mostly has two. This story does involve one Dan Plaster as well. Because a while ago, throughout the course of the football offseason, and sorry, UFL, you're considered part of the football offseason.
Yeah, it's weird how that, like, of all the football, and I'm a man that loves all football, that still hasn't grabbed me yet. I'm sure it will, but it just hasn't yet.
No, I mean, I'd watched a little XFL and some stuff in the past, but this year I don't know. It just doesn't feel normal still to be watching football that time of year, I guess. I don't know.
Right.
Anyway, because we are just degenerates who basically only talk about football, there is a certain time of year, well, and wrestling, there's a certain point of year, like, especially after WrestleMania, before the CFL season starts, where it's like, what are we going to do now?
Right.
And suddenly, I started getting in my Instagram DMs all sorts of weird videos of all kinds of random sports that had been somehow making their way into people's IG feeds, specifically Dan Plaster's. There were some like board games from India and like these different things and these weird like 1,800 different versions of tabletop soccer.
Yes.
I've been sharing them with you too after a little while. But
yes.
The funny one, the best one, the thing that's really come across our minds, and we didn't actually for some reason really dive deeply into you and I, that has really caught our eye, was Pesapalo.
Yes.
Now, if you don't know what this is, I do not blame you, because I had not heard of this until, I don't know, a month or two ago. But now I'm completely captivated by it, even though I'm just learning today kind of how it works, but even then I still don't know if I fully understand it.
Well,
it's essentially Finnish baseball, but the rules are just completely wacko.
It's kind of like if baseball and cricket had a sexy Finnish baby. That would be it. There's like guys that are holding up things that look like the NBC sign for some reason. It's pure chaos. But I think the thing that really went from hey, this is kind of cool. We both followed the top league of Pesapalo, Super Pessis, on Instagram. But I think what really sealed it was I sent you the other day, I saw it come up that Teemu Selanne was like at a game. And they're like, again, this is so inside baseball to a degree that they don't even, like, you have to use the Google Translate. Like, there's no English super
There's no English to be found on this anywhere.
No. And then it's like, well, Teemu Selanne's there. And then this morning, as I open up the IG, as I so often do, usually doing her morning poop as well, to throw that in there as well, I noticed that on top of all the chaos of this cricket baseball Finnish baby, there was a cannon. And I instantly stopped everything I was doing. I'm like, Gas, they have a cannon. So the past 2 days, they've had Teemu Selanne and a literal, like, colonial cannon on top of this weird baseball cricket mix.
Yeah, not like an artsy cannon like the Columbus Blue Jackets have. Like, this was an actual legitimate cannon. You see the whole thing move when it shoots. I assume they shot a blank still. I hope they shot a blank. But, yeah. It was interesting. So naturally, we decided to actually look this up more before the
Yes.
show because we should actually probably do some research, at least a little bit. And that's where we learned
yeah,
that
we
it
don't,
actually
we don't
called...
need to research the game. We both watched that, but Pesapalo, that's
We
where
actually
we need
learned
to
that it was
deep dive.
Pesapalo and that Super Paces is just the professional league
Right.
of it. So then that's the actual name of the sport is Pesapalo. And this is what really caught my eye and was really interesting. We still can't find any evidence as to whether it's true or not. Apparently there are people in Canada who have played this.
Yes, specifically.
Because it says it has some presence in other places because it's, very popular in Finland.
Yes.
Including Germany, Sweden, Switzerland. Okay, that all makes sense. Australia, okay, getting a little weird. And Canada's Northern Ontario, home of one, Jonathan Fraser.
That's right. That's I don't know how I've never played it. Like that, for a little bit of backstory, Thunder Bay is a very, very, very Finnish community. So it makes sense. In fact, it was like a community tragedy when the Finnish pancake place burned down in Thunder Bay. Like there's actually when I was there earlier, just about a month ago, they have donation cans for Rebuild the Hoito. And kind of everywhere you go to get this place back up and running, right? So I don't know. I guess maybe they didn't have insurance, but either way, it went up in flames. So I could see that there'd be Pesapalo. Now, on top of the electric factory of the highlights and some of the craziness and the strategy and everything you see to it, my favorite part is, unlike cricket, which I have been watching a lot of, and unlike baseball, which I've always watched a lot of, the fact is, if the ball goes out of play, you have to go retrieve it.
Yes,
So
keep going.
there is one highlight.
It's like when you played softball as a kid in one of those parks without a fence, and someone actually cranked it, and you got to go run for a mile to go get it.
Right, but sometimes they have fields by a creek, and we saw one guy go full send into the creek to get the Pesapalo ball because it looks like to get a home run, you have to run approximately a mile. So he probably had a legitimate chance of gutting the guy down after going full send into this creek to get the Pesapalo ball.
Yeah, so this is how long it takes to get there. There is, think a regulation softball diamond, but then the entire outfield is all dirt too, basically.
Yes.
So then what happens is there is the 4 traditional bases, but they are in sort of a weird spot. So you run to first base. You kind of go out the left side, about halfway up the baseline to get to first base. Then you take a hard right all the way to where you would think first base would actually be for second base, and then you go parallel all the way across to third base from there. And fourth base is the exact same thing. So, and apparently, if you hit a home run, which is basically if you hit it as far as you can go and you can get to third base because there is no actual over-the-line home run, all of the home runs are inside the park home run, which is something us sickos are always fans of. Basically, you stop at third base, and you scored a point, and then you can try to get to home base for another point.
So just by doing terrible, pinching my fingers to the scale math, looks like it's your traditional 90 feet to first base from home. And then it appears to be almost 200 feet to second, almost 200 feet to third, and then almost 200 feet back to home. So, you're running. This was not, no wonder everybody we see playing this is jacked. I am way too fat for this.
No, I don't imagine there's too many, I would hope that the, rec version is much smaller than this. If you're playing, I don't know, whatever the slow pitch version of Pesapalo is on a Thursday night in Finland.
Try not to get eaten and flown away by mosquitoes, but it is basically slow pitch, because the other thing we haven't mentioned about Pesapalo is the opposition just lobs the ball up for you, kind of like your buddies throwing batting practice, kind of like yourself.
Oh, it's kind of like, I'm sure I did it as a kid. Me and a buddy, we would go out there to one of the ball diamonds during the day we're off during the summer or something, and you throw the ball to yourself and you just hammer it out in the field for them to go get it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's kind of what it is.
Except the opposition's doing it, so it's just it's chaotic. It is to join in the fun. It is at Super Pessis, SUPERPESIS on the Instagram, and if you can speak Finnish, that's even better, because I can't, but I'm still in love with the sport.
Absolutely. And if for some reason one of the 7 of you out there actually know anything about this sport, please message us, or know a spot to watch it, please message us, because we are looking. We've found, obviously, the Instagram feed. We've seen all the Instagram videos, but I actually want to sit down and watch a complete game.
Oh, fantastic. I thought it was signed out of Instagram. Nope. Turns out Lacey is signed into Instagram. So, yeah, she's going to be getting Super Pestis highlights on her feed now.
As she should. Yeah, I think you've done her a great favor, quite frankly.
I really have. There's the one with the cannon. Right there. Yes. Gonna watch a few reels. Look, they've even got one that shows, like, the inside of the ball. Like, oh,
I mean,
boy.
This is kind of like when I was in Ireland a few years ago, and I learned about Gaelic football, and I really started to love it. We went to a game, and it was a lot of fun. Like, it's a weird mixture of, like, soccer and rugby and, like, volleyball all in one. Like, it's wild, and it's fun, and the locals love it. So now I'm like, I kind of just want to go to Finland to see this.
There's a bell? Like, and it looks like there's, like, legitimate highlight shows for
like,
the
I
sport.
did land on the Super Pestis website, and, like, you can find a spot if you have, I think, the cable provider there or whatever, or you can log in to actually watch the games, but obviously I think it wasn't available in North America or something. I was like,
All right, now I have an excuse to get a VPN. My YouTube ads are constantly filled with it. Now is the moment I need to get a VPN.
And then explain to Lacey why there's some charge for however many euros a month.
It'll all be worth it, trust me.
The trip to Hamilton was all worth it for the Saskatchewan Roughriders as they came away with their second win of the year. They're 2-0. Two wild and crazy, weird wins that will certainly be remembered. So we will get into that and a whole lot more. But before that, John, as usual, for the Pile of Bones Brewing Company, what is in the glass this week?
I've discovered a summer drink, Joel.
Have you?
I have. So Lacey went out and bought some, like, concentrated, like, fruit nectar, like guava and passion fruit.
Mm-hmm.
And they're supposed to be intended for, like, smoothies in our house.
Yeah. Of course, yeah.
But instead, I decided one night, and I have now perfected the recipe, to add some vodka, add some gin, add some of this stuff, and a lemon. So I've got it down now. It's 2 parts vodka, 1 part gin, all from our friends at Lucky Bastard.
Mm-hmm.
Half a lemon squeezed, 2 shots of either passion fruit or guava, bunch of ice. There's your new summer drink that's going to make you forget about just fucking up your lawnmower about half an hour ago.
Yeah. Apparently it hasn't, though, because you're still talking about it.
I know. It's because, okay, it's one of those things that I'm a little OCD in the fact that I'm like, when I start something, I want to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So my plan was tonight. I'm like, hey, I'll get the poop picked up. I'll get everything ready to go. You know what? I'll podcast. I'll have a couple drinks. I'll get the lawn mowed tonight. So in my mind, I'm like, I'm a failure if I don't get the lawn mowed tonight. And this is how my brain works. And then I proceeded to run over a chunk of concrete that I couldn't see at the back of my house and proceed to bend my lawnmower blade. So now I'm at a spot where, A, I can't easily find a replacement blade to send Lacey to go get. B, Maya's asleep, so it's not even like she could. And C, I got about 6 shots of alcohol in what I'm drinking tonight on an empty stomach. I ain't going anywhere when we're done this. So in my mind, I'm a failure tonight for all because I screwed up my lawnmower.
Yeah, I mean, you probably normally are, so I mean.
That's normally I'm just a drunk, not a failure.
For me, because I am on an IPA rampage right now, I'm drinking IPA from Blackbridge. If you have to yell it because it has an exclamation point at the end. Just a very delicious, straightforward, typical what you would expect sort of from an old school IPA, which I still love. So
and still like at most liquor stores, best bang for your buck is Blackbridge.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like they're usually like $3 to $4 cheaper than comparable 4-packs, and you're not really giving up on quality. It's not like you're going from, our friends at Pile of Bones to the brewery that will not be named. You're still getting quality for a decent price from the nice people at Blackbridge.
Mm-hmm. So the Riders are now 2-0 on the season.
Yes.
We've watched this team for a long time. You probably a little bit longer than I.
Yes.
And the Riders have a weird history of pulling games out of their ass that they maybe shouldn't. Of having a lot of weird stuff happen to win football games at, sort of at the right time.
Yeah.
That game on Sunday, that has to be one of the all-timers for being able to pull a rabbit out of a hat. When you consider everything they went through in that game, like they were down by at least 10 points for a good chunk of the game.
Yes.
Including like the last 2 minutes. They finally tie it up. I was kind of grumbling that Corey Mace didn't go for 2 because they had just tied it up with 40 seconds left, which is a boatload of time to get into Rouge range, at the very least, and win that football game for the Hamilton Tiger Cats. I would say probably about 75% of the time they probably pull it off.
Right.
But instead, because Tim White apparently doesn't know how to catch a football, another one bounced up, and CJ Avery had the interception that put the Riders in no doubt field goal range, and they won. And it was just, you're sitting there, and it's just one of those moments where you're like, you just kind of shake your head and of course that just happened, didn't it?
Yeah, I was terrifically confused because when they had scored the touchdown, I'm like, okay, I'm downstairs. It's Father's Day, so the only thing I want on Father's Day is just to watch as much sports as possible undisturbed in my basement. So the kids were down just watching with me, so it was nearing Maya's bedtime. I'm like, okay, great, they scored the touchdown. I'm going to go upstairs. Hamilton will be in field goal range by the time I get back down, and we'll see what happens. And all of a sudden, the Riders have the ball, and I actually texted you going, excuse me? What?
Yeah.
What? How do they have what? Like, I could see, like, maybe they would be in a situation where they forced the 2 and out, but there wasn't enough time for that. I had no idea what the hell was going on. And then I hit the rewind button and went, wow, that is wow. And Brett Lowther, no doubt on that one, even if he was missing, he put that one right through the end zone with his right foot. So what a wild opening 2 games.
Mm-hmm. Like 2 games, like if you go to the CFL stats, like the third-party Twitter account out there, the win probability for the Riders in both of them was never really that great.
No.
I think for part of the Edmonton game, they had the better probability, but that Hamilton one was all yellow until the very end, went bloop, bloop,
right,
and the Riders won. And if you're watching that game play in real time, like it felt like it's like, okay, the Riders were sticking around, but I never really felt they were able to get over the hump. And obviously, the big moment in that game where you thought for sure, okay, there's no way they're overcoming all of this, was the very weird fumble that CJ Rivas recovered without his helmet on.
For sure.
And because that was okay. That was one thing for them to not get that turnover. But then for them to throw the double flea flicker after that and then the touchdown, like the play after that, you're like, okay, like this is fate. Hamilton's obviously meant to win this football game. Personally, I wasn't so mad about it because I would have picked Hamilton. I would have gone 4-0 pick him on 3downnation.com. But regardless, they still found a way to come back. And you know, this is historically what this franchise has done. They've won weird football games. They always have that moment where you're like, you got to be kidding me. And they pulled it out. And yes, there is no question whatsoever the way they are currently playing football and winning football games is not sustainable. This is not sustainable. Process over results is not great right now, but the results are there, so you can kind of forgive it. So they kind of got to get it. They kind of got to get it together. They got to play a little better for the first 3 quarters, but it is good to know that, unlike previous years, because I think that game-winning drive, or the game-tying drive, in that game, they would not have been able to do the last 2 years.
Nail in the head.
The
right
offense
there.
would not have been able to wake up at the right moment and just, throw the ball down the other team's throat, make big plays, and score that touchdown the way they did. And it started off poorly. Like Trevor Harris took the sack on the first play, something like 80% of the time. That usually kills a drive. Instead, they throw it up. Jarrett Stearns basically gets split in half to make a catch.
Oh, yeah.
And at that point, you're like, okay, this is going to be something. And then they had like 2 bombs to Keon Schaefer-Baker, and they were in the end zone.
It was so great because you nailed the head, Joel. The fact that this team compared to last year's team showed that resiliency, that bounce back.
Mm-hmm. I just don't think the offense was physically capable of marching like that the last couple of years. They just weren't good enough.
No, I would absolutely agree with you. Now, again, Trevor Harris being back is the biggest part of that. But even, let's not forget, back when Trevor Harris was under last year's offense, they weren't lighting it up.
Swing pass, run, swing pass, run, and they would have got to about the 50 and then would have stalled.
Right. And another thing that I really like that they did last night was AJ Ouellette was getting stuffed at the line. That seemed to be Hamilton's game plan, was we are not going to let Ouellette get anything going, right? They've seen him for years in Toronto.
That was the trend both games the Riders have played for both teams, and that's why Bo Levi Mitchell and Trevor Harris combined for almost 800 yards passing, which we love to see.
and who does? But what I really like to see that the Riders did that I think they've been very bad at, and this even dates back to the Jason Moss era, that something isn't working, you just completely move away from it, you forget that guy, next thing you know, you're asking, why wasn't he featured more? I thought their usage of him, actually using the odd swing pass, the odd screen pass, using him as an outlet valve for Trevor Harris got him back in the game, which led to a couple really big runs, late in the fourth quarter, and not just running him up the middle and tiring him out. AJ Ouellette's the kind of guy, he's going to get his pound of flesh when it's the fourth quarter, when guys are tired, when guys don't want to be beat up, they don't want to be hit, and that's what you saw in that game. A nice combination of run and pass, which opened up the pass for Trevor Harris. Like, I honestly thought that in terms of fluke wins, I thought the team looked significantly better, especially offensively against it. Defensively, they did not, but offensively, They looked much better against Hamilton, especially in that last drive, compared to what they showed in Edmonton when McLeod Bethel-Thompson, the quote-unquote safe pick, kept gifting them football.
Oh, he's a safe pick, all right. Safe to be picked.
Safe bet to go over 1.5 pecks on playnow.com. But I was thoroughly impressed. Like, they were composed, which was amazing, because they got to clean that penalty stuff up. I thought with the discipline issues they were having, I thought for sure this is going to be one of those games that they implode upon themselves, and it's just going to be a poo-poo platter here at this last drive. But to see them put that drive together, the mix of play calls, the runs, the swings to AJ Ouellette, and then really they put themselves in a position to win that game, to be in that game, thanks to Tim White absolutely forgetting how to catch, which has been the theme for the first two Hamilton Tiger Cats games. And my goodness, there is no more Rider win than that. I mean, they are 2-0. You cannot argue with a record. And I do think, just as a casual observer, especially offensively, they are a far superior football team to last year.
Yeah, and like when I say they got to be better in that front, it's not that what they're doing was necessarily wrong. It's the execution's a little off still. Right. Because they've been down multiple scores in the fourth quarter in both games. You're generally not going to win a lot of football games doing that. So the offense needs to get going a little sooner. They had the one good drive early and then kind of disappeared for a while. They can't really have that happen too often. It's going to happen from time to time, of course. It's a long season, and lots of different stuff happens in games. But overall, like, the direction that the offense is taking, I still like what I'm seeing from Mark Mueller in terms of they're attacking down the field. We saw a little bit more out to the flat in this game, but that's okay. Like, you still need to mix those kinds of plays in.
And they were a mix-in, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
They weren't the crux of the offense. They were almost like, okay, we got to get AJ involved. He's not, himself. And even you could see, they were stretching the field so much that AJ Ouellette was so open for a couple of those that Trevor Harris, it would have been the poor decision to go to anybody else but Ouellette in the flats, right? Which was completely the opposite of last year. That was like, all right, there's a guy open in the flat. We got to make sure we key in on that and let him run directly into coverage. So it's all very good offensively. Like, and you said during our preamble that if you essentially count a Joe, I'm going to use the Dave Thomas pronunciation on that one. I was listening to him and Luke for a bit during the game because my PVR glitched out. But the Joe and Sean Bain combination, they essentially had 300-yard receivers in that game.
Yeah, so Keon Schaefer-Baker, of course, went for the 2 touchdowns in 109. Jarrett Stearns wins for 112. Sam Emilus, 45. Ajo 41, and Sean Bain Jr. 50, both basically each with a half each. So that position got 91 yards. And then added AJ Ouellette's 27. That's how basically, and Mary Alfred, the 1 for 6, which ended up being a pretty important catch.
Yeah.
That's how you get to Trevor Harris's 390.
I mean, pretty simple math right there. You said a lot of numbers pretty quick. I was not adding them up, and this empty stomach and gin is definitely winning.
I just have the stats page open, so it's just reading.
So
I will assume that the 390 is correct. Because I did have to go through because the weird no helmet penalty, they don't have that as in the play-by-play, they don't actually have it listed as that for some reason. So like I had to confirm because I was watching at my in-laws' house and I didn't have a whole lot of sound. I was like, because I saw it was reviewed, so I'm like, I asked the guys on the 3 down chat, I'm like, did they actually overturn it because of the penalty? And everyone said yes.
Yeah.
In the play-by-play on the CFL stats package, James Butler rushed middle for 3-yard gain to the Hamilton 36, fumbled by number 9 James Butler at Hamilton 36, forced by number 91 Anthony Lanier, recovered by Hamilton number 9 Jay Butler at Hamilton 36, advanced 0 yards.
Huh?
So according to the play-by-play, the penalty never happened.
I wonder if their archaic stats provider just doesn't have a way, because it was funny when that penalty happened. There are few, as a guy that's officiated lots of sports, taken some officiating courses for the sports that I call, there are a few things that are like black and white in any sport you officiate, and that helmet rule is one of them. And I did enjoy how normally Dwayne Ford's pretty conservative when it comes to that stuff, but even Dwayne was like, I get it, that's the rule, but that's not how it was meant to be interpreted. It kind of sucks. But we all knew that the officiating crew was handcuffed, because you can't say, well, but unless there's that room in the rule book, right? So it ended up being the correct.
It was the correct call. It didn't cost them the game. Even had Hamilton go on to win, it wasn't the difference. The breakdowns in the secondary, especially right after that, were the difference.
Especially Marcus Sales. My goodness.
Yeah. I don't know if it's necessarily a rule that really needs to be revisited. It's probably the first time I've ever seen it happen, and we may never see it happen again. But it just seemed kind of weird that clearly a guy loses his helmet a split second before, and there's a loose football right in front of him. Like, what else do you expect him to do? He's just going to lay there and not grab the football? He's probably still going to get crushed anyway with his head. You might as well let him grab the football.
Right. I mean, and it was funny, too, because Dwayne and Rod had pointed out that had it gone off of him and been scooped up by a Riders player, it still would have been, Riders football, as long as he wasn't the one to pick it up. So it was really bizarro land. But to Hamilton's credit, coming out with something from like the Lloydminster Flag Football League bag of tricks right after that play, while you were kind of caught off guard, absolutely love that. And we're not. You should
in that moment, unlike Ottawa with their one turnover and then ran the 1-yard run.
Right. Against who looks like the worst team in the CFL right now. But and you and I are not normally, we don't claim to be smart enough to pick on certain players, but Marcus Sales.
Yeah.
And that was rough.
Yeah. And I think this is a bit of a sign of a rookie head coach. Marcus Sales is obviously a name, but he was also released for a reason from the BC Lions. Right. And that's not to say that he can't turn around, he can't be better this season, but maybe just a week wasn't enough to put him into the lineup. I know there was maybe some other reasons why they wanted to make the change at safety, disciplinary, and all that sort of stuff. Yes. But at the same time, the defense wasn't broken last week against Edmonton, so why fix it? If there were issues in the secondary, I could see it, but there wasn't. So what are we doing here? So between that, sort of the unnecessary tweaks, and a lack of control on penalties, quite frankly, if we're going to talk about it, had they lost this game, this probably would have been a loss that was squarely on the shoulders of Corey Mace. So I'm sure the fact they pulled it out allowed him to sleep a little easier at night.
Well, like you said the good, bad, and the dumb. These things are going to happen with a rookie head coach. We know we are Corey Mace guys. I think the province is on the Corey Mace bandwagon, and him as a motivator, him as a speaker, him as a person seems to be exactly what this market has needed after, I mean, goodness, really, since Corey Chamberlain's first couple of years before his ego got out of control, right? We haven't had a coach that's community-minded, family-minded, stuff like that, right? So you're right, he did make mistakes, and it was funny watching Sales. The mistakes he was making was not an ability to keep up to guys. There was twice he was caught looking into the backfield, confused on coverage and stuff like that led to 2 wide open touchdowns for the Hamilton Tiger Cats. And if that's something that I can notice, then my goodness, I cannot imagine how his film session is going to go when they resume their work week tomorrow. Like, if I'm noticing it on my couch while having a couple beers, that's bad. That is really, really bad. So hopefully they get that.
That sort of thing is correctable.
Easy.
The ongoing penalty concern is worse because the penalties got worse. I mean, they were flagged 11 times for over 100 yards, 115 yards, 11 times. They were flagged even more in this game than they were the week before. And the things that's really got to be getting on, like, I know some people are kind of not sure about the misconduct calls, but I mean, clearly the league is setting a standard here at this point. Adapt or get out of the way, essentially.
Yep.
it's the special teams penalties. I mean, there's been at least 3 really good returns that have been wiped out by Mario Alford. And I would say, like, the next time someone takes a big return from Alford, you're sitting. See ya. Because, I mean, as important as special teamers are, in terms of everyone on the field, they are by far the most replaceable.
What 1,000,000%. What I laughed was the line. I'm glad you didn't steal it from me because I thought it was one of my better ones. You know how most quarterbacks will buy their offensive linemen like steak dinners and watches and things like that after a good game. Yeah. I think Mario Alford needs to put flaming bags of shit on every one of their 11 doors because it's incredible. Every time Alford breaks a return, like how frustrating could that be as Mario? He'll never admit it, but like no. There you are making these dynamic high effort level plays, and every single time there's laundry. Like he's making unbelievable plays and there's flags everywhere. Like it and especially too for a guy like Mario Alford that, you know, maybe I get it. The return game is almost essentially disappeared in the NFL, but if that's what you're going to hang your hat on, that's your shot at making it to the next level. And a lot of scouts, they're not going to watch every moment of film and go, yeah, there was an illegal block. They're just going to look at your stats and go, yeah, you're not quite good enough. Right. So that's got to be so frustrating and it really taking away a big weapon just by stupidity. And everyone, I'm not sitting here criticizing the officiating. I think every single one of these special teams plays that has been called back has been, I know sometimes they can get a little ticky-tacky, but they've been legitimate calls. They've been legitimate mistakes, and they've just been legitimate head scratchers that's really damaging their ability to flip the field.
Yeah, it can make a big difference for an offense that is still trying to put it all together and find their way to becoming a little more fine-tuned of a unit. And I mean, I think it's taken some literal points off the board too, because a couple of them are touchdowns.
Yes, 100% they are. And the offense compared to last year, you know, I don't think this is a team, as we talked about the season preview, this is not a team that's going to need special teams touchdowns to win like they did last year. This is a much better team. You can already tell 2 games in. But hey, bonus 6 points is always going to be great. It should be, you know, the cherry on top of the sundae. It shouldn't be the sundae itself. It should be that little bit of fluffy whip of the cherry you get on there. And oh my God, I just realized how hungry I am. But yeah, they got to clean it up. They've got to figure it out, and hopefully Mace is the guy to bring it all back in line.
Yeah, I think he will be, and those are really the 2 clear things they need to work on. Everything else is sort of a work in progress in some various degrees because it is only week 2 of the regular season. But I think at this point, at least for now, we have sort of 3 clear trios in the league in terms of where sort of the league's at. Obviously, it's very, very early, and everything can change by the end of the season. Because most of last year, we talked about how there was Winnipeg, BC, and then there was like a large cluster of everyone, and there was Edmonton.
Right.
This year, I think we can clearly lay out 3 trios, and the gap between, especially I think, the second tier and the first tier right now isn't necessarily huge, especially because one of them in each has only played a game, so a lot can change still. But I think it's safe to say right now, the 3 best teams in the league are Montreal, Toronto, and BC. Maybe not necessarily in that order, except for Montreal. They're clearly number 1 and deserve to be. I could listen to arguments either way for Toronto or BC being number 2. Personally, I put BC number 2 in the power rankings. Then you go into sort of the second tier, which is where the Riders find themselves, Calgary finds themselves, and Ottawa finds themselves after a pretty good win over the Winnipeg Blue Bombers for them. Yes. And then you got the bottom, which I don't think 2 of the teams are all that surprising, where you have the Hamilton Ticats. They're they could easily make their way up into the second tier if they have another good game.
They've got some signs of life.
Like they are. I think they could be better than I thought they were going to be. Based on what I saw last week or the other day, at least anyway, we'll see kind of how they do coming to Saskatchewan and then going forward. Then you have the Edmonton Elks, who we kind of aren't surprised to see there all that much. And then you have, in my opinion, the team that should be at the very bottom of the power rankings, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
Which is funny because everybody thinks that we're both Bomber haters. Meanwhile, I've been shouting from the rooftops all these years about my Winnipeg Blue Bomber love on the various podcasts I've been on. But I think objectively, as both of us, we watch a lot of football.
Yeah.
and we've used this term a couple times. There's early season bad, and then there's bad.
Yeah.
The Riders at times, the defenses looked early season bad. Hamilton for parts, they looked good for most of that game.
I think the good example of that was BC and Toronto versus BC last week against.
Right.
Again, BC when they played against Calgary.
Mm-hmm. And you have early season bad, and then you've got Calgary, who I think surprising me a little bit. Like Calgary's looked early season good, which is good for them. But Winnipeg to me has looked bad. Like, and we've talked about this so much here on this podcast about how razor thin they are. They're a veteran team, and maybe they've held on to their guys for too long. Already, I'm on 3 Down Nation looking at the fact that Dalton Schoen is missing practice. Kenny Lawler's out. Like, you go so top heavy.
Now, isn't he?
Who's that?
Nichols in the secondary is also hurt.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, saw that too. So you build your team to be so top heavy, and then you get some injuries, and it just all goes to hell. You get a bunch of guys that haven't really played in the preseason together, right? Like, there's nothing Winnipeg can, like, even Edmonton, you look at them and go, okay, they can't stop anybody. But McLeod Bethel-Thompson can make some plays. Yeah. I still think they're best players on the bench in Trey Ford, right? No, Calgary just looks to be like a solid, not spectacular, kind of across the board. BC's great in both aspects. Saskatchewan has a horseshoe lodged up their ass, but legitimately looks like a good football team, right? Montreal, since turning it on last year, Toronto, even Ottawa impressed me with Drew Brown. Like Drew Brown looks like
Drew Brown looked like a quarterback for sure.
He looked like Zach Collaros looked when Zach Collaros was good playing behind that Winnipeg offensive line. But you look even at Hamilton. Like Hamilton, Bo Levi Mitchell looked a little bit like vintage Bo Levi. The running game wasn't there. He had a lot of painful drops. I don't think the offensive depth is there. But then Winnipeg, what are you hanging your hat on? Sergio? And even Sergio had the chip ball and wasn't his best. Like, there's nothing I have watched from my Blue Bombers that makes me go, they're going to be good this year. If anything, I've almost come to terms with it that, if this season and probably next and maybe the year after is the trade-off for a decade of essentially being, or a half decade of being the New England Patriots of the CFL, I'll take that all day long. Like, yeah, I will.
These things are up and down. They're cyclical. The cycles sometimes last longer for some other teams than others.
Right.
But it does, without the catastrophic injury to their starting quarterback, it does feel 14-15 Riders-ish, where they had sort of the big win, they had sort of the big top of the mountain moments, and they just tried to hang on to it for a little too long.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. And I'll go back to the base of my Zach Collaros and I've never once said Zach Collaros is bad. I've never said that on social media. I will once again defer to my take that Zach Collaros is good. He's not great. And if you're the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, if you really thought he was that great, you're not spending any money to bring Chris Streveler back, as much of a nice story as that is, as much as maybe Streveler said he only wanted to come back to Winnipeg, right? So the unfortunate thing is Winnipeg is hosting next year.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd hope that there'd be some sort of a change, maybe, a puncher's chance to get in, but they look like the team that's run it back one too many times. And if that's the price you have to pay, if you have to pay Willie Jefferson and Adam Bighill and Zach Collaros and Patty Neufeld, if you have to pay all these guys because of the previous success, so be it, because they had the previous success. They had the Grey Cup championships, right? I honestly think, and I'll say it here, and I've decided I enjoy being right more than I enjoy my team winning. And I don't know what that says about me, but I'll say it right here. Spicy take, 2 games in, Bombers are missing the playoffs.